Hey guys, so the history of Christmas, someone asked me about it and they were trying to figure out kind of how Santa Claus would go in with Christmas and Jesus and all those things. Um and so yeah, sorry, someone's in my eye. But so just kind of getting right into it, man. Christmas has been celebrated, or let me not say Christmas, but celebrations during the winter, during December, they've been happening for over 2,000 years, before they ever started celebrating the birth of Christ. Okay. If you kind of look, through history, not only religious celebrations, but just secular celebrations as well. Okay. And I'm sorry if my camera's going in and out of focus. I don't know what's going on with it. But of course, as we live in the Western world, we know that Christians celebrate Christmas as the birth of Christ. Okay. But more popular customs, they include exchanging gifts. People decorate their homes. They decorate Christmas trees. They attend church. They share meals with family and friends. In America, children wait for Santa Claus, and then in other parts of the world, they wait for Saint Nicholas. Okay, so December 25th, Christmas itself hasn't been a holiday in America very long. It didn't come into like being a holiday until 1870. Okay, but of course, just kind of getting right into the history. The middle of winter, like I said, it's always been celebrated, because specifically in Europe, winter was like really harsh. They had really bad winters. Okay, and so the early Europeans, they would celebrate that light was coming and that the birth of the darkest days of winter had came, because that was signal that summer was coming. Okay, just kind of throughout Europe, if you look about the history, like in Scandinavia, Yule was celebrated from December 21st to January. And pretty much what this was is that it was a recognition of a return of the sun. Okay, so fathers and their sons, they would go out and they would get some wood and they would burn the wood, and people, they would feast until that wood stopped burning, and that could be up to 12 days. Okay, but they saw that every spark would show how many pigs and calves will be born that next year. That's what they believed. Okay, so not only that, the cattle that they did have, they would slaughter, and the reason why is because they wouldn't be able to eat during the winter. Because a lot of the vegetation dies and things like that, and so that also would be the first time that those Scandinavians, they had fresh meat. Okay, and then not to mention, wine and beer had been fermented, like it was ready to drink, so that was a good time for them to celebrate. Okay, if we look at Germany, people, they would honor the pagan god Odin. And Odin, they were terrified of him. Okay, but they believed that Odin, he would take nocturnal flights throughout the night, and he would go and he would look and he would watch people and observe them, and he would decide who would prosper or who would perish. And a lot of people chose to stay inside because of this belief. Okay, most commonly, where a lot of Christmas traditions have been kind of adopted from, is the Roman festival of Saturnalia. And Saturnalia was a festival that was dedicated to the Roman god Saturn. Okay, and he was like the god of agriculture. Okay, and during this time, it will be held during mid-December, mostly. Okay, but if you look at the Julian calendar, because if I'm correct, it's different from our calendar. But the Julian calendar, it would fall on December 25th. Okay, And on this day, everything closed. People, they decorated their houses with like green wreaths and other types of greenery. They would decorate. They had a temple that was dedicated to Saturn, so they would decorate that and they would have their festivals in there. And even slaves, like everything that was in Roman society that was considered normal, it switched during this festival. So it was common that a slave wouldn't be a slave. A slave would be kind of acting as their master. They would be sitting at the head of the table and not the master, okay? The Romans, they also would celebrate by gambling. They would sing, they would play music, they would socialize with each other. And then they would give gifts, and they also would give candles to each other. And later on, you would see that they would give like type of little figurines. And some historians believe that that was kind of given in exchange, like as a reminder of like human sacrifices. And then of course we get into Christianity. Okay, now mind you, I didn't know this, but in early Christianity, Christmas was not celebrated. They never celebrated the birth of Christ. The most common holiday that was celebrated in early Christianity was Easter, pretty much celebrating what Christ did on the cross and our sins being forgiven. Okay, it didn't come around until the 4th century when people really started to celebrate the birth of Christ, and that was around the time where Pope Julius I, he decided to choose December 25th as that set day to celebrate the birth of Christ. But of course we know that Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. Most likely Jesus was born in the spring, because that's when shepherds would be shepherding their sheep. They wouldn't be doing this in the winter. But when this first happened, they called it the Festival of the Nativity, but it would also go around the same time because, mind you, Rome, the Pope, a lot of historians believe that the Pope did this to accommodate people still celebrating Saturnalia, but instead of dedicating it to the Roman god Saturn, they would set it and designate it for the birth of Jesus. Some also believe that the church used this as a way of kind of getting more people into Christianity. Because at that time, yes, Christians and Romans, they did life together and stuff. Sometimes it was good and sometimes it was bad. Okay. But eventually this Festival of the Nativity, it was spread to Egypt and England. If we look, by the Middle Ages, which if you don't know what that is, that's between 500 and 1500. That's the Middle Ages. Christianity had already kind of replaced pagan religions. If you remember, I was talking about this about a week or two ago. Even during the time where Paul was writing Colossians, Christianity had already kind of been just spreading. Okay, it was in Africa, and that's a whole different topic in its time, that Christianity was not forced on slaves because Christianity was already in Africa before they got the slaves. But anyways, during this time though, how the Christians was celebrated was a little bit interesting. So they started going to church, right? And then after church, they would go and they would get drunk and they would celebrate this carnival. They would celebrate in like this carnival type thing. Kind of how Mardi Gras is, or Mardi Gras. I don't know how you pronounce it, but they would, it would be kind of like that. That's how they would kind of participate in this, which that was interesting to find out. I didn't know that. But anyways, when we move further on, kind of, because I'm kind of talking more about the Western world. I don't want to really get too caught up in the history too much. I really just kind of want to talk about mostly America, because that's where we see, Santa Claus. Of course, there are Christmas trees throughout the world though, but y'all get what I'm saying. So when we get to America, when America was first founded, because if you don't know, in England, I want to say it was King Henry, was it the second? It was a guy that kind of rose up, and he did not allow, like Christmas to be celebrated. And then somehow when King Henry, I want to say the second, got back, in being the king, he allowed Christmas back. But when America was founded, they didn't celebrate Christmas. To be specific, from 1659 to 1681, celebrating Christmas was illegal in Boston. Like, literally, you would be fined 5 shillings if you celebrated Christmas in Boston. Like, that's just how they just did not celebrate Christmas. And it wasn't and Christmas didn't become, like I said earlier, Christmas didn't become a federal holiday until it didn't become a holiday until 1870. That is true. June 26, 1870, that's when Christmas became a federal holiday. But, you know, if we see, you know, like I said, from 1659 to 1681, it was outlawed. During the 1800s, that's when Christmas really started getting picked up. And most people believe that it was due to, you know, the high unemployment rate at that time. And then also there were a lot of gang riots that was happening during that time as well. But most people believe that a man by the name of Jeffrey Crayon, I want to say his name. It's either Jeffrey Crayon or it's a book that was written called the Sketchbook of Jeffrey Crayon. A lot of people believe that started the tradition, because most, or that sketchbook in itself, it was about how, like, the rich people and poor people came together on this holiday and celebrated or something like that. And so some people believe that is what really kind of started Christmas as well. And then, of course, we know that around this same time, something very common, A Christmas Carol, was written by Charles Dickens. And so, during this time also, the American family, they were becoming less disciplined, and they were starting to become more sensitive to the emotional needs of children. And so, most people would participate in this holiday because it gave them a reason to spoil their children, to give them attention, and it wouldn't be bad because you're buying your child all these gifts and giving them all this attention. And moving on into Santa Claus. Okay, so now we didn't kind of find out where Christmas comes from, and I'm telling you just the history of it. And then we're going to talk about of course, Santa Claus, and then we're going to talk about Christmas trees, and then we're going to talk about some scriptures that people use to tell people about Christmas and stuff, which, yeah, anyways. But Santa Claus. Who is Santa Claus? Santa Claus came from a man by the name of Saint Nicholas. It was adapted from the Dutch, and if you don't know about Saint Nicholas, he was born in Turkey around 268 AD, and he pretty much gave all his, well, not 286, guys, it's 280 AD, but pretty much he gave all his wealth away, and then he went to the countryside to take care of the poor and the sick. Most people refer to Saint Nicholas as the protector of children and the protector of sailors. But like I said, it was adapted by the Dutch. And they, instead of just calling him Saint Nicholas, they kind of created an abbreviation, and they would call him Sinterklaas. 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 And so when they came here, Americans, y'all know we can't get accents right, so we just started calling him Santa Claus. But the whole, you know, man with white hair and a jolly, you know, he's happy and he has a red suit, that actually came from a poem that was written by an Episcopal minister by the name of Clement Clark Moore. And it's called An Account of a Visit from Saint Nicholas. What we most commonly know it as Twas the Night Before Christmas. Okay, and this is where a man by the name of Thomas Ness, based off this poem, he drew what we know as Santa Claus, this jolly man in red with, you know, white hair, and a sack of toys. So, Yeah, that's where Santa Claus comes from. But and even in Germany, I don't know if they do it now. I know, well, I would say they do, because there's some people there that are around my age. They were kind of talking about Saint Nicholas, and of course the tradition has changed. But they still do Saint Nicholas, whereas here in America, kids do Santa Claus. But moving on to where did the reindeers come from? It actually came from a man by the name of Robert L. May. He came up with Rudolph. He was just a figment of his imagination, but he was doing it to get more people to come into his department store. That's where, you know, the reindeer comes from. Moving into Christmas trees, okay? Christmas trees were used before Jesus as well, as far as what we would consider a Christmas tree. Now, us decorating it and all that stuff, that didn't come around until the 16th century. The Germans brought that, okay? But if we look at Christmas trees before the time of Jesus, the people during that time, they believed that Christmas trees kept ghosts and witches and evil spirits away, and that it would right, sorry, not ghosts, because ghosts ain't nothing but demons. But so with Christmas trees, the early people, they believed that Christmas trees would protect you from evil spirits, from witches, and like from illness. And so y'all remember when I talked about how they would celebrate the coming of light? Well, what does that mean? They're talking about the winter solstice. If you don't know that the shortest day of the year falls on December 21st, and the longest night of the year, the shortest day and the longest night is on the shortest day is December 21st. The longest night is the night of like December 22nd, going like from that night going into, you know, December 22nd morning. That's the winter solstice. So the ancients believed that whenever, you know, winter had came, they believed that the sun was actually a god, and that the sun was sick and he was weak, and that's why winter came. And so when they had that really short day and then they had that long night, they would celebrate because like, oh, the sun, he's better. Summer's coming. Not to mention evergreens. If you look throughout different cultures and throughout history, evergreens reminded people of, you know, everlasting life. It reminded them of it reminded them that the green plants was going to come back eventually, because evergreens, they don't change colors. They're always the same. And so, starting with the ancient Egyptians, they, their god that they decided was weak was Ra. And if you don't know Ra, he has, if I'm correct, he has the face of a hawk, and then in his crown, it's a disc of the sun. And so, when they saw that he was recovering, the ancient Egyptians, they would fill their homes with the green palms. And then those palms, they symbolized that life had triumphed over death. And then, of course, I kind of talked about Saturnalia already with the Romans, where they were worshiping the agriculture god Saturn, not the planet. But they would decorate their homes and the temple of Saturn with evergreens. If we look at the Celts, they would decorate their temples with the evergreens as a symbol of everlasting life. Even the Vikings, they would they thought that evergreens were a special plant of the sun god Balder or Belder. I don't know how to pronounce the name. But what we do specifically with Christmas trees, like I was saying, it came from Germans in the 16th century. So pretty much devout German Christians, they decorated evergreens. Why? I could not find out. But they I guess adapted this, I don't know. But they took the evergreens, and then they would put candles on them, but If they didn't have evergreens, if like the wood was scarce, they would build like little wood pyramids, and they would put candles on it if the wood was scarce. Now, where did the lighted candles come from? Most historians believe that it came from Martin Luther. If you don't know about Martin Luther, he was like a Protestant reformer. You don't really hear about him too much. Like if you were to go to seminary, they won't really talk about him too much because some of the stuff that he kind of taught, a lot of people didn't agree with, and some of them weren't biblical, and so, but pretty much he was, you know, walking home one night, and he was composing a sermon as he was walking home, and he looked through the evergreens and he could see the stars twinkling, and he was in awe of it. It was so beautiful, right? And so he wanted to show his family. So what he did, he put an evergreen in the main room. That's where your Christmas tree is supposed to go, in the main room. And then, because he wanted to show them, he got lighted candles and he somehow wired them to the limbs of the tree. And so he wanted to show his family. And so that's where a lot of people believe that the lighted candles on the tree came from, because Christmas lights didn't come up until like 1900s, late 1800s maybe. And if you look at little lights, don't they look like little flames of a candle? Anyway, at least that's how they used to when I was a kid, because I don't decorate Christmas trees. I never really, I don't know. I just never really was interested in it like that. I don't know. Anyways, but pretty much moving on. Like I said, America didn't really adopt a Christmas tree until late 1800s, 1900s, and they really started decorating it with ornaments, because when they adapted it from the Germans would put like apples and nuts and little cookies. That's what they would decorate their trees with, and then Americans started doing the homemade ornaments. Okay, and so of course, with the Rockefeller, tree, that's kind of where it kind of showed where the Americans really wanted trees all the way to the ceiling instead of 4-foot little trees. But yeah, that's just the history of, Christmas and everything and all like that. But a lot of people, and I'm gonna have to, I gotta pull it up, but a lot of people use Jeremiah chapter 10 verses 1 through 16. And they use another verse, but I'm gonna read it to you. I'm gonna be reading from the ESV. It says, "Hear the word that the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel. Thus says the Lord, learn not the way of the nations, nor be dismayed at the signs of the heavens, because the nations are dismayed at them, for customs of the peoples are vanity. A tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of a craftsman. They decorate it with silver and gold, and they fasten it with hammer and nails so that it cannot move. Their idols are like scarecrows in a cucumber field, and they cannot speak. They have to be carried, for they cannot walk. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good. There is no one like you, O Lord. You are great, and your name is great in might. Who would not fear you, O King of the nations? For this is your due. For among all the wise ones of the nations and in all their kingdoms, there is none like you. They are both stupid and foolish. The instruction of idols is but wood. Beaten silver is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz. They are the work of the craftsman and of the hands of the goldsmith. Their clothing is violet and purple. They are all the work of skilled men. But the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and the everlasting King. At his wrath the earth quakes, and the nations cannot endure his indignation. Thus shall you say to them, the gods who did not make the heavens and the earth shall perish from the earth and from under the heavens. It is he who made the earth by his power, who established the world by his wisdom, and by his understanding stretched out the heavens. When he utters his voice, there is a tumult of waters in the heavens, and he makes the mist rise from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain, and he brings forth the wind from his storehouse. Every man is stupid and without knowledge. Every goldsmith is put to shame by his idols, for his images are false, and there is no breath in them. They are worthless, a work of delusion. At the time of their punishment they shall perish. Not like these is he who is the portion of Jacob, for he is the one who formed all things, and Israel is the tribe of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. So when we go up and we start, I know I read the whole thing, I shouldn't have, but in verse 3 where it's talking about a tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of a craftsman, it's talking about making idols from wood. It's not talking about a Christmas tree. Even though some of y'all do idolize Christmas trees. I ain't even gonna lie. Like, y'all be so excited to get your Christmas tree, and it's like, it's just a tree. But anyways, moving on to Isaiah 44. Starting in verse 12, it says, the ironsmith takes a cutting tool and works it over the coals. He fashions it with hammers and works it with his strong arm. He becomes hungry and his strength fails. He drinks no water and is faint. The carpenter stretches a line. He marks it out with a pencil. He shapes it with planes and marks it with a compass. He shapes it into the figure of a man with the beauty of a man to dwell in a house. He cuts down cedars, or he chooses a cypress tree or an oak and lets it grow strong among the trees of the forest. He plants a cedar and the rain nourishes it. Then it becomes fuel for a man. He takes a part of it and warms himself. He kindles a fire and bakes bread. Also, he makes a god and worships it. He makes it an idol and falls down before it. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over the half he eats meat. He roasts it and is satisfied. Also he warms himself and says, aha, I am warm. I have seen the fire. And the rest of it he makes into a god, his idol, and falls down to it and worships it. He prays to it and says, deliver me, for you are my God. Y'all, these scriptures is not talking about Christmas trees. It's talking about literally cutting down a tree. You use half of it to make a fire, and then using the other half to carve a graven image, something that you're gonna fall down and you're gonna worship. Now, of course, with Christmas trees, they ain't been carved technically, but some, like I said, some of y'all do idolize Christmas trees. So really, the question is, how do I say this? The real question is, are you really worshiping God, or are you worshiping the traditions of Christmas? And not to mention, the same thing that I always say with Easter. This is something you should be celebrating every day. If you're going to celebrate the birth of Christ, you should be doing that every day when you're praying to God. Because prayer ain't nothing that you just do every once in a while. Prayer is something that you should be doing. The Bible tells us to pray without ceasing. And the Bible also tells us to enter his courts with praise and enter his gates with thanksgiving. So why are you not being thankful any other time besides Christmas and Easter? That's something that you should be thankful for every day, to be honest. So, I mean, question is, where's your heart? Because a lot of people, y'all get excited about Christmas, and yet y'all are still so rude and nasty to people. And it's like, what? So anyways, but I hope that this kind of brought a little bit more clarity. I'm sorry that I had to make it so quickly, because I ain't packed, y'all. I ain't did nothing, and it's almost 6 o'clock. So, and I gotta go put stuff in my car. Like, y'all, it's a lot. But I hope that this kind of brought a little bit of clarity about the history of Christmas and kind of how we celebrate Christmas here, and really asking you the question is, what are you really meditating on? Are you just excited about getting gifts? Are you excited to put up your Christmas tree or your lights? Or to have eggnog? Or to, I don't know if I say this, but, you know, to give gifts or to receive gifts, or you get to go see the Christmas lights or do all this other stuff. The question at the bottom of all of this is, where is your heart? Because during this time of the year, it is so easy to get caught up in trying to celebrate and just, you know, have people over and follow traditions when we really forget who we should be really worshiping. Like, same way with Thanksgiving. You should be thankful all the time, not just on one day. So, anyways, I know this wasn't really a teaching video. It was just more of because somebody asked a question and I answered. So, yeah. So I hope you guys, if you are celebrating, if you are celebrating, have a Merry Christmas, Feliz Navidad for my Hispanic people. You know, what else? If you're not celebrating Christmas, what are you doing? Because everything gonna be closed. So what you doing? I would like to know. If you're celebrating, you know, the birth of Christ and you're just eating dinner, that's cool too. I mean, follow your convictions, because Christmas in America's way ain't got nothing to do with Jesus. I mean, honestly, because think about it. Nobody says Merry Christmas no more. What do they say? Happy holidays. Like, I know I've been saying I do it intentionally. I'll say Merry Christmas. They're like, you too. People don't like that Christ in it. But hey, even if Santa Claus was real, he was gonna have to bow down to Jesus too. I'm just saying, okay? But y'all read up on Saint Nicholas. He sounds like a pretty cool dude. I know I'm gonna be researching on him. I'm assuming that they call him Saint probably because the Catholic Church has probably adapted him, because they have a lot of saints. But anyways, I know I'm just rambling on. But anyways, stay safe out there. If you're celebrating Christmas, have a Merry Christmas. If you're not celebrating Christmas, have a great weekend. Have a great Saturday. If you're alone this Christmas, that can be a good thing, but that can be a bad thing. Depends on how you look at it. So I encourage you to look at it as a time for you to spend time with God. Because the year is ending as well. It's a lot of time for us to be, you know, reflecting and really, you know, seeing what God has for us in this upcoming year. What God is, you know, gonna be doing and things like that. And so, but I love every single one of you guys. Bye.